How to change between fractions, decimals and percentages. So sometimes we need to be able to change fractions into decimals, decimals into percentages, and so on. Now there's some things that if you know them, some facts, that it's going to make things really easy for a lot of different questions, and you just need to know them, you just need to learn them. So we need to remember that half equals 0.5, which is also equal to 50%. A quarter equals 0.25, which is equal to 25%, so 25% is also equal to a quarter. 0.2 equals a fifth, and a fifth equals 20%, and 20% equals 0.2, and a tenth equals 0.1, and 0.1 equals 10%, and so on. If you know those facts, it makes things much, much easier. Let's say, for example, then you wanted to work out 3/4. If you know a quarter, you can work out 3/4. So if you know that 1 out of 4 equals 25%, 3 out of 4 will be 25 times 3, which will be 75%. So 0.25 add 0.25 add 0.25 is 0.75. That's 3 lots of 0.25, and that's what 3/4 is equivalent to 0.75. Same sort of system. If you had 1/5, 2/5 would be 40%, and 0.4, and say 3/5 would be 60%, 0.6, 4/5 would be 80%, 0.8, 5/5 is 100%, 1 whole. So remember that 100% is 1 whole, and a whole is where the numerator and the denominator are the same. So if you know these facts, it makes things a lot easier. However, there is also a method that you can use for questions maybe where you can't remember these facts, or there's different fractions that aren't those ones and you don't know them off by heart. So let's have a look at a few examples. So let's start off with this one at the top. So this is a nice easy example to start with. Now the question would say, what fraction, decimal or percentage is shaded in yellow? What's easy about this question is we've got 100 squares. So if you see a grid like this, it's often 100 squares. So it's 13 out of 100 as a fraction are yellow. That's not. And 13 hundredths is 0.13. Okay, that's our 13 hundredths, and that equals 13%, because it's out of 100, and percent means out of 100. It's a really straightforward example. Let's have a look at another one. A question like this: what fraction, decimal, percentage is shaded in? So first of all, let's do a fraction. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 10. We've got 3 tenths. Now you might remember what a tenth is from the previous facts, but let's say we can't remember. How are we going to change this to a decimal and a percentage? Now this isn't out of 100, so what we need to do is we need to make it out of 100. We need to make the denominator 100. If we can do 100 divided by this number and there's no remainder, it will work. So does 10 go into 100? Yes, it does. 100 divided by 10 is 10, so we need to multiply this by 10. So 10 times 10 is 100, and then whatever you do to the denominator, you must do to the numerator. So all I'm doing here is just doing some equivalent fraction calculations. So this is 3 tenths equals 30 hundredths, and 30 hundredths is 0.3 or 0.30, which is equivalent to 30%. Right, let's have a look at a slightly more challenging one. We've got a square here which has got 25 squares inside, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 of them are coloured in. So we know that 8 out of 25 are coloured in, and we want to work out what 8 out of 25 is as a decimal and a percentage. Now your question might not have a picture like this. It might just be that 8/25, and it says write it as a decimal or percentage. So what we need to do is we need to make this fraction out of 100 if we can. And can we do 100 divided by 25 without there being a remainder. Does 25 go into 100? So 25, add 25 is 50, add another 25 is 75, add another 25 is 100, so that's 25, 50, 75, 100. So it goes in 4 times. So therefore we're going to multiply by 4 to make it out of 100, and therefore we must do 8 times 4, so that's 32. So 8 25ths is equivalent to 32 hundredths, which is 0.32. There's our 32 hundredths, and that equals 32%. Let's have a look at a question going the other way. Let's say, for example, you were given 0.64 and you're asked to express that as a fraction and a percentage. So first of all, there's 64 hundredths here. So it's simply 64 over 100, which equals 64%. This is not in its simplest form, so if you wanted to write it in its simplest form, we need to find the highest common factor of 64 and 100. So what we could do is, we know it's going to divide by 2, so we could divide that by 2, which is 32 over 50. And we could divide this by 2 again, which will give us 16 over 25. And I don't think that simplifies anymore. So this is the answer in its simplest form here, 16 25ths. So 16 25ths equals 0.64, which equals 64%. And remember, 16 over 25 is also equivalent to 64 over 100. So quick recap. Remember to learn your key facts and use these to work out other related facts. Changing fractions to decimals and percentages is about making the fraction out of 100 and then changing it to percentage. One thing to note is that if you're just changing decimals to percentages and percentages to decimals, you can normally just see what to do because it's quite obvious, but just be aware that this 0.64 to 64% is when we're going from decimals to percentages, what we're actually doing is multiplying by 100, and when we're changing from percentages to decimals, we're actually dividing by 100. So just be aware that's what you are doing if you were to do a mathematical operation there.